Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of Over a Cup, where I discuss horror topics over a cup of coffee, after I've had time to truly absorb the terror. And in today's episode, I will be discussing what is probably my favorite book, Borrasca, by C.K. Walker. Now, this episode is not only special because of how much I love this story, but there will also be an email interview with the author of the book, C.K. Walker, which at the end of this video I will narrate for you. It feels so good to finally be able to record. I had a head cold earlier, and as much as I wanted to record, I couldn't because I couldn't breathe and talk at the same time. Thanks, Ethan. But aside from me complaining about my coworkers, let's start with this story. Borrasca opens with a family getting news that they're moving. The protagonist, Sam Walker's father, did something bad and got relocated to some little out-of-the-way county out in the Ozarks. Sam is at first hesitant, but he adapts to his new area, whereas his teenage sister is throwing a tantrum because she's forced to move away from her boyfriend. However, they arrive to their new home in Drisking, Missouri, and the next day we're introduced to one of the other more important characters of the story, Kyle Landy, and in the awkward greetings we learn of when this story takes place. Sam mentions just getting Tekken 4, which, if you do some research, released in 2001, and looking deeper into the early 2000s, I realized Sam's sister, Whitney, the sulky, depressed, probably angst-filled teenager, what is she doing? Sam mentions in the move that she was texting viciously, and also mentions that she's constantly locked up in her room. She's probably listening to what I believe is the best era for metal music, the early 2000s. As my coworker once said about the early 2000s, it was really the rise of nu metal, with bands like Slipknot, Tool, and I could go on, but that's not the point of this video. You know what? Oh yeah! It's time for a knockoff, copyright-free form of a similar sounding band because I'm too afraid of getting into copyright issues. But really though, being Sam's age, having an angsty teenage sister in a small town around the early 2000s, I feel like I can fully be immersed in the story and empathize with Sam. Nonetheless, Kyle introduces Sam to the third wheel of their tricycle, Kimber DeStaro, where as the summer goes on, they go to all the noteworthy spots and trails the small town has to offer, until finally at the end of summer they take Sam to the grand finale location, which is also a key location to the story, the Triple Tree, and thus begins the urban legends of youthful ages. Stories and rumors about the Triple Tree, where kids have entered the treehouse without the proper ceremony and disappear, and then they die, perhaps abducted by the skinned man. Now, the kids don't know exactly what happens when you enter the treehouse without the proper ceremony, but after hearing a metallic grinding noise, Sam asks what it is, and he's given the answer of Borrasca, which is where they believe they go when they are kidnapped, to a place where bad things happen. Later in the story, after school starts up, we find out Sam's sister Whitney has gone missing. Did she go to the Triple Tree without the proper ceremony? Did she run away back to her boyfriend in her hometown? Or was she kidnapped by some of her new friends? I'll leave you here and let you find that out for yourself. But remember, like the book says in its opening, you may think you know about the bad things. You may decide you've got it all figured out, but you don't, because the truth is worse than monsters or men. Now, if by some chance you haven't paused now, do it. Take that moment to go on Amazon, grab your wallet, and look up this author. Get yourself a copy of her collection of stories called Cold Thin Air, or you can listen to the fantastic narrations by the No Sleep podcast edited for audio by C.K. Walker herself, or listen to the narration on YouTube by Mr. Creepypasta. But I think enough time has passed to warn you I'm going to get to some more spoilery details of this story. Ultimately, after searching in vain for Whitney, the grinder sounds signaling death at Borrasca, where bad things happen. And as the story progresses, Sam ages and he's now a teenager himself, as he has a job and partakes of some more age-gated substances. I'm going to jump to what the noise is, where Borrasca is, and what happens when bad things happen. Following the suicide of Kimber's mother, she gets kidnapped and brought to Borrasca, or what is referred to as the farm by its tenants. Sam and Kyle finally trace where this place is, and they sneak into it to find a truly horrifying sight. The realization of what is happening, and honestly, I have a difficult time describing what it is, and it's really worth finding out for yourself. You know, I've realized I have to explain fully what's going on here. It wouldn't be a thorough over a cup review in spoilers had I not talked about everything. And it's a little difficult for me to talk about, and I apologize for trying to beat around the bush. But anyway, Borrasca, or the farm, whatever you want to call this place, the sheriff and select few of the town were kidnapping outsiders, outside women, runaways, and impregnating them. And they were selling the babies on the black market for profit. Some of the babies are used as community service for the townsfolk who were infertilized by the iron ore getting into the water table and infertilizing the entire town. Yeah, it's a little intense. It's a little serious to talk about, and I feel like that's what makes this story stick with me, is its intensity. In the end of the first part of the story, Kimber escapes. Kyle is beaten to a near death but survives in a vegetative state, and Whitney was found, and Sam runs off and moves away. It kind of lets off in a downer, and I feel like it really says sometimes in this world, good doesn't always win. However, there is a second part to this story, and in the beginning of it, we find that Sam is living in Chicago, addicted to heroin, and just really living a much sadder life after he's had the realization that all of those women that he left at the farm, he swore to return to, are still there, if not already had a meeting with the shiny gentleman. As we know, Whitney was killed. Kimber arrives in a mission to take Sam along in this quest to expose Borrasca and finally vanquish this metaphoric demon known as Jimmy Prescott. They find out that not only is Mr. Walker the sheriff, but he's running this whole operation, and it has slowly evolved into more of a brothel for human trafficking. The man Sam grew up loving, slowly becoming the man he distrusted into the man he hated, has been killed, and the Borrasca is seemingly returned to its normal operations like Jimmy wanted. However, Sam points out the final plan of Sam's action. He set up multiple cameras in the trees and is broadcasting all of this live. It is a bluff, but Sam has a strong enough poker face to sell the facade, as his roommate is hacking the database and gathering all of the information on Borrasca and its tenants. Maybe sales records? I don't know if something like that really requires a paper trail? I mean, probably, but you can't take your receipt and excuse me, I bought this baby off of you guys a while ago and it seems to be defective or something. Can I speak to your manager? Anyway, remember Kyle, the best friend? He was left at a vegetative state at the end of the first story? Well, he was finally taken off his meds, and it turns out he was chemically forced in that unresponsive state. The story ends in what is probably one of the most bittersweet endings I've heard in a while, when Kyle gains consciousness and asks, "Kimber?" This story has grit. It is as immersive as can be, and it is so raw Gordon Ramsay would scream about it. If you're a reader and want a story about a small town with secrets, corruption, and truly the depths of wickedness humanity can or will do to satisfy their greed, this story cannot be recommended any more than I already am. It's so good that I yearly revisit this story at the first snowfall of every year. Please, if my entire channel will ever manage to accomplish anything, I want it to be to help the spreading that this story very much deserves. Now, the rest of this video is going to be the interview between me and CK Walker. It was through email, so it was all text-based, and unfortunately I don't have a separate recording of her, so you're going to have to hear me answer myself, but I'm not going to fake a girl's voice or anything like that for the sake of this video, because I am sure that would be a massive disservice. So for my YouTube video, you will see the name CK Walker above whenever she is answering. Otherwise, for podcasts, I'm not sure exactly what to do. I guess for the audio-only crew, just understand that the first person is the interviewer, that answers is the interviewee. So, easy enough. Let's go on. So, is there anything you're currently working on that you can discuss? Well, I'm working on many things. Pilots, consulting jobs, feature specs, and new stories for the No Sleep podcast. If I'm correct, you wrote for the Netflix series called The Haunting of Hill House. Am I right? I did. Okay, so considering that, I was wondering if the character named Mrs. Walker has any references to your pen name or the Walker family of Borrasca. No, though Mike Flanagan did tell me in the writer's room that he named that character after me. Okay, so do you prefer to go by your pen name for the duration of this interview, or is your full name okay? Rebecca is fine. I'm calling this series of videos Over a Cup, so I feel it's nearly obligatory of me to ask, what is your preferred warm drink? Irish coffee for sure. Do you have any customs or traditions for when you write? No, my only rule is that I never write when I'm not in the mood. I feel like when you read authors who weren't really into it in the time of writing, you can tell, and it's reflected to a degree. Is there anything you're working on that you can or feel comfortable talking about? I am working on quite a few things, including a new concept I'd like to pitch for TV. I'd like to pause this interview right now just to say that I realize I asked the same question twice, and I would like to thoroughly apologize about that. If you're watching this, I'm sorry. Back to it. What are some general inspirations for your work? It's hard to be general. I find inspiration everywhere. An obvious one might be True Detective, S1 for Borrasca. I really empathize with Mira and her husband struggling with fertility, Were you inspired by the infertile community at all? Slightly. Someone close to me suffered through infertility for many years. Her and her husband became incredibly desperate for a baby. Sometimes I felt like they would have done anything. They did end up getting pregnant, however, and now they have a 6-year-old son. That being said, is there anything you'd like to say to the infertile community? I won't try to pretend that I understand that sort of pain, but I do understand crippling emotional pain in general. It was very difficult to watch my friends go through their journey, and in the end it took them 9 years to conceive. They took a lot of breaks as they felt it was important for their mental health. I'd like to take a time out right now just to make my own personal statement towards the infertile community, which I feel that I have been a part of for some time now. Whatever it is that you need to do to feel better, do not be ashamed of it. Your mental status is way more important than how anybody else feels. Like, for instance, I couldn't go to Thanksgiving, I couldn't go to Christmas dinners or anything like that, and one of my family members told me to just get over it. And I'm trying to be more understanding that she didn't mean it that way. But if you haven't personally experienced the loss of a child, I think you have no right to judge others on how long it takes or what they do to get through this grief. Just be mindful of others. That's really all I can say. If you are a person who hasn't had a loss like that, but you know someone who has, just be mindful. Just understand. Anyway, let's get back to the interview. How much research went into the background of Borrasca? The atmosphere, the picturesque town, characters, black market pricing, I could go on and on. More than I would care to admit. I'm sure I'm on quite a few watch lists now. Did you plan Borrasca V, or did you mean to leave ends untied and open to interpretation? I never planned Part 5. Borrasca is an emotional story with a downer ending. Part 5 was written as a Christmas gift to those who wanted that happier ending. It has definitely grown on me. In Borrasca V, Sam is addicted to heroin, and there is a running theme of characters trying to help him fight this addiction and get clean. Did you have any experience with loved ones having addiction struggles? I actually do not. Sam's addiction was very research-based. Well, I believe that concludes everything I have to ask. Is there anything else that you'd like to say that I haven't quite asked, or make any statements that you want to get out there? Thank you all for the interest and support. Well, that concludes the interview and the rest of the script, so the rest is just kinda winging it here. Borrasca on its own is a fabulous story and is well deserving of checking it out, but also check out some of the other works of C.K. Walker. I mentioned the Cold Thin Air books. There are multiple volumes of that, and she's also, outside of the pen name Rebecca Klingel, like I said, wrote for Haunting of Hill House, and she has a lot of other things in the works, it sounds like, and I have to say I'm excited for every single one of them. And Rebecca, if you are watching this, thank you for sticking through with how long this video is, and I just want to say your work is fantastic, and your willingness to make an interview with me is incredibly touching, and this episode means so much because of it. So Truly, Rebecca, thank you. But I believe that wraps up this whole video, so yeah. I guess I will see you guys next time.